Okay, good morning, everyone. We are now approaching part two of our fourth speaker series for the academic year. And Khriseten Bellows is going to continue with this topic about helping students write better, and helping in particular in the last part of in part one of her series, she talked about front loading. And one of the ways that you front load things is you can front load these graphic organizers that help students be able to lay out their ideas in their writing more coherently. And that when students give us work, when they submit work to us, that there's also a thing called selective corrections, right? You don't go through and tell them to fix everything, but you'll find two or three major issues like, sentence, subject verb agreement, or, quotation marks. You're just not using those at all properly. You tackle two or three of those things, particularly in the rubrics, highlighted in the rubric. And then you can slowly developmentally over time take care of the other things as they grow and develop their skills in the earlier things that you address. So, Kristen, I think I'll just turn it over to you and let you go on and get started for part two.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. Our last session was really interesting, and I really appreciated your feedback. And as I said before, I'm tailoring these talks to what will help you essentially in your everyday grading life, but also in your interactions with your students. And I'm hoping that today you'll also give me some feedback so that I can really understand what you're going through, and so that I can target some of the solutions. So I know I've been an educator for almost 30 years now, all the way from pre-K up through college. And so I understand all the struggles with different developmental ages and as well as skills. And so for this lecture, I wanted to talk about the diverse learners that we interact with every day, and that essentially what we have to understand is that our reality has changed over the last 15 years. Our student population has changed dramatically, and that's one thing that I want to address and really understand how I can support you in that. So I'm going to throw some data at you today. I'll try to go slowly so that it's not overwhelming. You can always watch this video again if you want to look at the slides. I'm happy to share them as well. So if you just want to take some time and digest them after the lecture, you're welcome. I can send this out. So please, halfway through, or actually the first quarter, I'll ask you the essential question and give you a little time to digest it, and then we'll discuss it, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. So thank you for coming. All right. Here we go. So this one is called How to Inspire Confidence and Better Writing in Diverse Learners. As I said before, welcome to part two. Thank you for participating in this presentation today. Our agenda, I always want to put an agenda out there so you know, and I do this for my students as well. I make sure that they know exactly what I'm doing so that I'm prepared, they understand what to expect, and they can sort of get into the mode of where the lesson is going. So today we're going to talk about, I'm going to review some of the points from lecture one. Even if you weren't able to come, we'll review some of those real points. And I'm trying to build and scaffold these 4 lectures on each other so that we can really learn and develop our ideas about them. We'll also discuss some data on diverse learners in the US, reflect on how we can help students and why it's important. And then I'm going to teach you 2 techniques that you can employ in your own classes and courses. All right, so this is just a quick review of lecture one. The essential question for that one was, how can we help our students become better writers? So we discussed, based on your feedback, APA expectations, how to encourage more idea development and organization, strong thesis statements, deeper analysis, and more efficient grading. One thing that stuck out for me was how to encourage more idea development. And we really discussed how we can push our writers to develop more, even if they're not very long assignments. Another thing that we discussed was an instructor's ability to teach strong writing skills will benefit everyone. And I believe that it has to be with every subject, because, you know, taking the span of different courses that college students take, every course needs to really develop and work on writing skills, because they're necessary not only for all of our college classes, but also for, you know, after college and in the workforce. We also talked about pre-writing techniques and focus corrections. Those are the two aspects that I wanted to focus on for that first lecture. Is pre-writing to stimulate creativity and also help the students focus on the topic itself, and then focus correction so that it makes your lives easier. To inspire purpose-driven assignments for more engagement in the writing process too. And then grading is faster with timely feedback, which allows students to reflect, revise, and edit more constructively. All right, here we go. So another thing that I do in all my classes and my courses is that I make sure that I write down our objectives, because I always want to have some kind of navigation through the lesson or through maybe the unit or even through the course itself. So today we're going to talk about assimilating information about diversity in our student populations. I think that's really, really important to digest. Also reflect on challenges that we have in the instruction of writing and skill building. And then I'm going to teach you 2 techniques to promote confidence and better writing acquisition. So here's our lecture 2 essential question. Please take a minute to jot down your ideas about the following. In our courses, we have a wide range of writers. Given the diverse educational backgrounds of our students, what are 2 issues you encounter when evaluating their writing skills? What solutions have you discovered? So I'll give you about a minute. If you could just think about those, jot some ideas down, even if it's bulleted points, and then I'll ask you to just give you some feedback on that. What are 2 aspects or 2 issues that you encounter? Okay, take 30 more seconds. And then 10 more seconds. All right, what kind of feedback do you have for me? What are some of the issues that you go through when you think about and when you do evaluate writing? Linda, Evelyn, Kevin, you're welcome to jump in there too.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Hi, everyone. It's
That's
Linda.
okay.
It's
Hi.
Linda Murphy-Chili. Typically, the first thing that I see is the APA. I mean, there's just like, I know you had addressed it in your previous, but it's the APA, and they do not answer the question. So 2 things that tells me is that they do not understand what the content is about, number 1. And number 2, the APA I don't know if it's too much or they've never had to do APA or, but by the time the students get to me, I teach, well, I shouldn't say that, that's not fair. I teach the research course. So by the time the students get to me, they should have a really good grasp of APA and hopefully how to answer the questions, because they'll have like 1 or 2 courses left to take to complete the program. I'm in the RN to BSN program undergrad.
Okay.
For
So
the
juniors and seniors?
yes,
Okay.
technically yes. For the initial one, sometimes I teach the beginning course, issues and trends. Of course, APA, is, you're a little bit more lenient with the APA because they're learning about it, number one. And number two, again, same thing would be not answering the question directly. So from the beginning courses to the end, towards the end courses, those are the 2 major things. Minor things I see are like organization. Well, I wouldn't call this minor, but or sentence structure. They cannot even build a sentence, literally. So
what do you mean by that? They cannot build a
they
sentence?
cannot, I mean, the
Complex
question
sentence or just basic sort of?
not clear at all. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, you just read the sentence and it's like, Lord, well, I really don't know what you're saying here.
Yeah.
And the
Fragments, probably. They're probably fragmented sentences. Often they write like they talk, they're just talking and they're just writing. So we don't always talk in full sentences. We, add things and they'll just write the same way. Maybe that's what Julie is saying there.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I hear you, Linda. I know, I think APA is, I think especially through higher education, that's one thing that so many instructors have complained about and wondered about and how they can support their students. I teach a informational and media literacy course pretty much every session. And it is, and this is through USU, essentially it walks the students through APA, how to create APA, how to create an annotated bibliography. And I'm actually kind of surprised that a lot of these are, they're usually sophomores in college, depending on their sort of educational background and where their holes are in their credits and that kind of thing. But certainly parents and working professionals, and they're taking this course in order to, hopefully ramp up to your juniors and seniors. But I don't know of very many courses like that. One thing that we can do is front load your courses and just say, here's a quick review. Or, one thing I would suggest is that you have some kind of document that gives them a 1-page kind of quick sheet on APA formatting so that you don't have to spend too much time on that. Also, Purdue OWL Writing Center has an incredible, it's an incredible resource for all types of writing difficulties and just sort of resources. So I would suggest Purdue OWL. And that could be a link on your document or on your welcome page or that kind of thing, so that you can already tell them, look, you need to know this. And then maybe halfway through the course, if you see that some students are not following APA correctly, I mean, that's when you start saying, you guys, you should know this. And that's when they understand that some points will be taken away, I think that is important halfway through the course. I mean, in the beginning of the course, I don't think you necessarily that we should sort of be punitive before teaching what they need to know. So maybe it could be just kind of a quick, half an hour quick video lesson that you create, and then you post it on there so that students can refer to it. That's one thing. I also think organization, sentence structure. I mean, we'll get into some of those aspects just in terms of understanding our population. So it's really hard I think pre-writing will really help. Also, the last techniques that I'll show you today might also address those issues. And Kevin, you talked about fragmented sentences. I mean, technology, we were talking about this before, that some people are actually creating sentences like they would when they're texting, no punctuation and no, run-on sentences and that kind of thing, and very little depth. So I think that that's where technology is sort of impinging on our ability to really create more in-depth and idea-driven writing. So I'll talk about that. Maybe at the end we could discuss whether there are other solutions. And Linda, just before I jump into Evelyn, are there any solutions that you've discovered that would help with these two issues?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've incorporated many of your suggestions, and we have great pre-recorded student webinars that are available. APA, how to use Turnitin to avoid plagiarism.
Sure.
And I typically, in my announcements in the beginning, I give them a lot of, it's like a standard announcement that I send out. These are the major mistakes that people make using APA. So they have examples there. For the most part, they do very well. And just for your information, I know you may not know this, but the School of Nursing, we do not use the OWL. We are to refer our students to the APA manual and the APA style.org for all of their writing needs. So we were told to refrain from the OWL because, yeah. So just, I know you didn't know that, but now you know.
Okay, good to know.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
The reason they do that, by the way, Kristen, is because what students will do is they'll do something wrong in their paper, and then someone, the faculty member will say, well, that's not proper APA. And the student will then reply back, well, that's what the Al Purdue website said.
Okay.
And so we don't consider that an original source. The APA website and the APA manual is the original source. We try to direct them to. The Al Purdue is a great site for helping people understand the basics and, giving them overviews and lots of tools and resources. But we don't want them to quote the Al Purdue website as the reference for how they're doing their APA. We want them to use the APA manual. So that's the context of that.
Good to know.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, Evelyn, it's all you.
Okay. I just want to say I was one of those students one time in my past year, years.
Don't worry.
Yeah. And thank God to great professors, teachers that they knew what I wanted to say, but they said, relax. Because when we speak Spanish, we forget about the sentence structure, punctuation. And she said the same thing. You write the way you speak. So slow down, take a breath. That means you need a period there. So long story short, here I am with a master's degree. So I'm grateful. And I
but you had good guidance. That's the thing, right? You had good guidance and you had people who understood that you just needed some, sort of a way to maneuver through English.
Exactly. And I think I that's why I enjoy teaching at Aspen. I love Aspen because those students are me and I understand, I can sympathize with them. Again, I'm not a scholarly writer myself, but I understand and the rules of writing and my students, their writing is limited, especially the international students. Let's say if I ask there's a question about heart disease. What is heart disease? They'll just say, heart disease is when your arteries are clogged. I'm like, okay, is there more? So they stop. Whereas other students they'll go from the anatomy of the heart, 5 pages later into at the end, heart disease is blah, blah, blah. So as an instructor, I go back and give them an audio feedback because sometimes it's too much to email them on. And I tell them, when you're making a cake, and that's this I remember from the old school. Do you just say, this is a cake? It says, no. What do you put in the cake? Eggs, oil, blah, blah, blah. Exactly. That's what writing is. You want to explain to a person never made a cake. How do you make a cake? And they go, oh, Ms. Diaz. So some of them, as they go along in the program, they get better in the modules. They get better.
Mhm.
And I tell them, carry that forward to the next class. Explain, because it said, make believe that your teacher doesn't know anything about heart disease. I'm a
Yeah.
dummy. I don't know anything. Explain to me from the heart so that I can understand at the end. And then go, oh, so some of them have enjoyed that. Others, they're like, we're nurses. I know about heart disease. I say,
Mhm.
yes, in your country you do, but here you must explain yourself a little bit more so I can understand. Make believe I don't know anything about heart disease. So it does work sometimes. You
And
know,
one thing that you could also say is, well, you might know everything about heart disease, but your patients will not. So one of the ways that you can translate your writing in, just sort of cognitively is to think, wow, I'm going to have to explain this to my patients who don't necessarily know all the intricacies of heart disease. So I need some details. I need some strong terms. I need to be able to be really comprehensive in my descriptions.
good point.
Yeah,
Good point. Thank you.
sure. So was there any other, you talked about writing is limited, and then you give audio feedback. That's great too. That really helps. And making a cake, sort of having this idea of all the ingredients that is involved. Are there any other issues that you run into?
And last time that the first time you gave this lecture,
Yeah.
I like that you said about texting a friend. I
Mm.
used that on one of my students. I just finished the 8-week module,
Yeah.
and she emailed me back and said, Miss Diaz, I looked up at one of my texts. It didn't make sense. I said, exactly. Read your text, because she was just verbatim just saying a bunch of things. And her
Sure.
friend used to say, what are you saying? What are you saying?
Mhm.
So I told her that's how I myself continue to practice too. Just
Yeah.
reading your text. And thank you for that.
Good. Oh, I'm glad. It's kind of fun to do. I mean, my son, who's 12 years old, we just got him a phone, and now I just keep on saying, Cassius, you need to put in punctuation. Cassius, you need to use your descriptive language. Even in that, he's like, Mama, why do I have to do that? But I'm already sort of, instilling it in him. And he's in 6th grade. So, hopefully I'll impact him somehow.
Speech to text, I think, will be the next sort of
Mhm.
crippling effect, I guess, on our writing,
Yeah.
because we just won't even spend the time to type stuff out. Think of about how time consuming that is to sit there and type everything all the time when you can just talk. Well, once the speech to text, takes over, then it'll be even more like what Evelyn and all of us are saying. It'll just be like the way we talk, and it won't be an academic style of writing any longer.
Mhm. Yeah, and that will be more difficult to bridge that
Maybe that's
gap.
part of the students' problem, or I won't say problem, part of their challenge is they don't understand the difference between, hey, there's a time that you do text speak, and there's times that you do shorthand, there's times that you do get brief, and then there's times that you don't. There's times you're supposed to elaborate, and there's times you're supposed to talk more academically and not like you're talking to your friends. I don't think they always distinguish between the two types of writing,
Mhm.
styles, and there's more than that. I just gave two,
Yeah.
formal and informal, basically, is what we're talking about here, and they will often slip the informal into the formal.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
But I think Evelyn's point is also important. They will also only do the assignment. There's not more that they want to put into it beyond just doing what the assignment says.
Hmm. Well, yes, I think it is developmental generally, but at a higher educational level, one thing that we can do as instructors, hopefully you can integrate these two techniques that I'm going to teach you today, because the whole point, and we were talking about front loading, but the whole point of helping students from all different backgrounds is really, really making sure that we're not overloading them, especially students with English as a second or third or fourth language, and just saying, here's a 5-page paper, here's the topic, do it in the beginning. That's really difficult, especially for people who are trying to acquire English. So I'm focusing on smaller, shorter assignments so that you can really assess them well, and they can get your feedback, so that over the course of your semester or your 8 weeks or however long the course is, students can understand where they're going wrong and how to steer, and you can steer them correct, in the right direction. Yeah, I think I'll just jump into the data because it's so overwhelming in some ways. in terms of what our population, how our student population has changed over the last 15 years. I just like you to see some of the data, and at the end, I'll ask you if you have any questions or comments. So let's jump into this, and then if you do have questions, just let me know at the end. There we go. So the first thing we need to know is, what is diversity in our learners? The definition essentially encompasses socioeconomic, worldview, race, age, culture, gender, sexual orientation, physical abilities, cognitive abilities, life experience, and the developmental stage. So all of those are the multiple aspects that we're looking at our students. And if you look under here, it says undergraduate student populations. So 52.9% are non-Hispanic white. This is as of 2019, generally in the US. 20.9 are Hispanic. 15.1 are Black, 7.6 are Asian, and 3.5 are American Indian or Alaskan Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islanders. Women represent the majority of undergraduate students. Students served by federally supported special education programs was 14.1%. This is across the US. And 70% identified as gay, lesbian, bisexual, asexual, queer, or questioning. So if you just take those statistics, we have such a bevy of different kinds of students. So of course we're overwhelmed. Of course we don't know how to, we're not totally sure how to really kind of get them under our wings and help them. Oops, went back. All right, going back. Sorry about that. All right. So here we go. Oh no. All right. So what about English language learners? So 74.8% of all English language learners speak Spanish, which I thought that was incredible to understand. I have to start learning Spanish better. English was the fourth most common home language for ELL students. Arabic, Chinese were the next most commonly reported home languages. Then Vietnamese, Somali, Russian, Portuguese, Haitian, Hmong, also commonly reported. So all of these students, that idea of that English was the fourth most common home language, I thought was really, really interesting. All right, so now go to this one. What about their socioeconomics? So 37% of are older than 25. No longer do we have, the majority of students as, just 18-year-olds jumping out of high school into college. 64% work while they're in college. Only 50% are financially independent. One quarter is parenting. And I thought this was overwhelming. 31% live at or below the federal poverty level. So now we're building on just a broader scope and a deeper sort of level of understanding who we're teaching, really. Okay. So why do we need to tailor our courses with this in mind? One, to adjust to growing needs of our students. Also to accurately assess how well our students are learning the material that we're teaching them. And then also to improve on our craft. That's really important. I know it's important for me. I constantly want to learn and figure out, and that's one reason why teaching is so incredibly compelling to me, is because I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly feeling a little bit uncomfortable because everyone's changing all the time. So that's kind of fun. All right. So here's my first technique that I'd like to talk to you about. It's called mini papers. So mini papers encourage students to organize their thoughts, to speak coherently in class generally. And then writing can be used in many ways to learn content and improve fluency in writing proficiency. This is written by Ellen Goldberg, who's the director of Honors Scholarship Program and teaches law at Mount Ida College. This is an idea of creating short minute assignments, such as the first thing you want to give if you're in person. You could say, okay, everybody files in, you give them a minute to kind of settle down, and you say, all right, what I'd like you to do is get out a piece of paper and summarize 3 things you have learned from chapter 5 this week in a paragraph, 1 paragraph, that's all. And, or they could have them answer one specific question about the previous lesson, or something that it could be in the future. And you could say something like, how much information do you know about heart disease, for example, for nursing students? These are really easy to grade. You can get timely feedback so that students know exactly what they have to work on, and it's a comprehension check. Also, if you want to use a paper copy for in person, or you could use a Google form online. That's one thing that would be pretty easy to do. And then you apply 1 category of your writing rubric to the grade. We talked about it in the last lecture, that just focusing on the specific corrections rather than the whole gamut of corrections, really for these short, mini papers will really help students understand how to proceed to the bigger sort of more involved papers. And then this boosts confidence by students knowing what to write about, and your corrections allow them to edit. That helps a lot. All right, so here's another one. So this is the second technique. It's called a peel paragraph. So you could also call it a teal paragraph if you like, but I call it a peel paragraph. It's a structured form of a paragraph to show essential information. So and I'll give you sort of a physical breakdown of this, but the first sentence or the first couple sentences are the purpose statements. It's idea driven. It's that mini thesis, right, on the very first line, so that the reader and the writer both know where this paragraph is going. So it's idea driven, debatable sentence that introduces the topic. And then E is evidence, use of quote or data to substantiate the claim. It always has to connect back into the purpose statement. The analysis is the explanation and the connection to the claim or the thesis. And in literature, you would have the purpose statement, maybe a quote from, let's say, the short story or the text, and then the analysis goes into the diction of the evidence and really talks about connotation and denotation, the different levels of what these words mean and why the author chose to use them. In a more scientific form, the evidence analysis would connect back into the evidence and how that could, we were talking about, let's say, glaucoma, for example. What are the 3 causes of glaucoma? And the evidence would have different pieces, different quotes from scientific journals, and then the analysis would connect back into these 3 different aspects of glaucoma. And then the link is 1 or 2 sentences that relate to the next paragraph. If it's just 1 paragraph, then it's 1 or 2 sentences that tie up that 1 paragraph. All right, so here's a physical form. You could literally just give your students this. It could be as simple as this. Say, you know what, for this, Friday paper, it's just going to be 1 paragraph. You have your purpose statement, you have your evidence and quotes, you're going to analyze that evidence, the evidence and quotes, and then you have a link to the next paragraph, or you just have a conclusive sentence. The cool thing about this is that essentially in almost every academic structure that's necessary for academic writing, you just replicate this sort of form. So you have your your introduction or you have your abstract, and then you have a peel paragraph and another peel paragraph, and they build on each other. This could be for a 5-paragraph essay. It could also be for a 50-page dissertation, because it's essentially what you are trying to do. And obviously, depending on the assignment and how involved it is, or how, what academic level is it, master's would have one level. If you're working on your PhD dissertation, then you're going to have many more pieces of evidence, and your analysis will be much more involved. But essentially, this is what students need to know. They need to know the structure of academic writing. And this is one thing that you could say, here you go. The first week that they're in your class, you could say, I'm going to teach you about the structure of a paragraph. This is how it should go. And you could also, I know, and especially in literature, you just do peel, you go purpose statement, and you go evidence, analysis, evidence, analysis, evidence, analysis, and then you have a link. So you're constantly going back and forth, but the evidence and the analysis always go back to that purpose statement or your idea, claim, whatever it is. All right, so here's an example. And this is actually one that one of my students wrote, and she didn't want me to put her name on there, but it was one of my students. So, all right. So this is for English 542, which is a master's reading in the content area course that I teach. And the prompt was, how does the teacher support collaborative conversations using academic language? So I just put these, the Peel sort of abbreviations right before, so they would identify the aspects of this one quote. In order to support collaborative conversations, it's important to foster communication and discussion prior to the actual Socratic seminar. So already in that purpose statement, there's a claim. The claim is you need two aspects, communication and discussion. So I know as a reader that that's what the paragraph is going to be about. Then the evidence, the instructor in the video states, so as I'm circulating the room, that time is even more important than the debate that takes place later, because I'm making sure that all of the students are talking about these issues and taking notes. There's your quote. And then the analysis of that quote is by engaging and checking in with the students individually, and ensures that they're collaborating. Ms. Proctor is able to guide students and engage with them about the topic. As she notes, this time is valuable for students who may not be as likely to participate. Students who struggle with English, learning disabilities, or shyness may not be keen on discussing information as openly as their more extroverted or participatory peers. And the link for this one is just a conclusive sentence. As they begin working off each other in discussion, she observes collaboration, but wonders about how to promote equity. I'm sorry, that is actually a link. So she could go on, and the last sentence kind of starts a bridge into the next paragraph that says, oh yeah, here's what she was already talking about in discussion, but now the next paragraph is going to promote equity. So the next paragraph could be a Peel paragraph all about equity. Okay. All right. So here we go. Oops. Go back. All right. So it felt kind of quick, but here are our objectives. Let's just revisit them. We learned about the diversity in our student populations, reflected on our challenges, which I really appreciate you helping me with, because for the next lecture, I will integrate those and actually more ideas about your concerns, how it can help. Accurately assess our students, that's really important. And you acquired 2 techniques, mini papers and Peel paragraph, to promote confidence and better writing. Last little bit, questions and answers. Thank you for your time. I would love to answer any questions you might have. So thanks for listening.
That was a wonderful presentation, Kristen. Thank you so much. I really like the appeal paragraph. And I think that that is what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct something. I was, thinking as you were doing that, and I'm going to
Mhm.
actually construct something and put that in my announcements or whatever.
Mhm.
I like that a lot, to actually give them an example. So thank you. I love that.
Yeah, great. I'm glad it will help.
Yeah.
And you can tweak it too according to whatever course you're teaching. You can just say, okay, this can apply to any one of your courses, but understand that here's how to do it. So the first thing we have to do is say, here's the structure, here's how to do it. Let me give you an example, model it, and then that's when they can do their own homework. Essentially, they can really do some work on it. And I think the key is, when you get those first couple papers back, say, oh, great, you're on the right track. You just need to tweak your editing, or you really need to focus on idea development, but your structure is wonderful, that kind of thing. So we give positive feedback and really make sure that they know exactly what we're talking about in terms of where they can go.
Yes, thank you very much. I have always been an advocate of example papers. However, I understand that there could be major cons with that. I know a lot of times students ask me, if I can, send an example paper, but I think that this Peel paragraph that I can compose actually using one of the components of the assignment, just to give them a small example, I think would be great, because particularly when you're first, as an undergrad student, when you're first learning how to look at the literature, pick your topic, develop a PICO inquiry where you can go into the library and research your topic based on those keywords. I think that it is important for them to actually see a paragraph of how they can analyze one of the questions that are in the assignment guidelines. So thank you. I really like this. This gave me a great idea, because like I said, I've been a long advocate for to give them an example paper to look at, but I do understand, the ramifications of that. But I think this Peel paragraph will really help me out. So I thank you. I love it. Thank you, Kristen.
Great. I'm so glad that it will help. Yeah. And the other thing about this, we talked about the data and how many different types of students we're teaching. These are just practices not only for ELL students and students who are using special education programs and just all of the different backgrounds that we have, but they're just best practices for any student, really. And so I think that's really important, working on this progress principle that Teresa Amabel was talking about. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, I had to say goodbye to my husband. But so, yeah, this idea that it's a scientific finding that people are motivated by experiencing daily progress. And so working with our students, we have to keep that in mind, is that it will really, really help us. And for anybody who's ever learned a different language or learned a different skill, it takes time. It really takes time. It's developmental. Sometimes, I lived in Greece and I taught myself Greek, but there were so many holes in my understanding, because I just was, foraging around trying to read a Greek English dictionary in the beginning and doing my best. And I did the same with Portuguese. And I know how frustrating it can be. And it's very easy to get discouraged. And I think that's really important, especially if you're learning a new set of content. And a whole new course and you want to do really well. And all my students, and I'm sure for yours, they want to be successful. They want to do well. They want to feel good and provide for their families and themselves. And it's all about that idea of working on a daily level and progressing on a daily level. And I think as instructors, we can help them do that, especially in writing, by saying, you know what, here, I'm going to give you the skills, I'm going to model it. And then you gotta do the work and still communicate with me. I think that that's really important. And Linda, one thing that you were talking about is it sounds like you're very open with your announcements and saying here, you're very transparent with your information, and that really helps students. Everything, also any documents that they can download and have in a physical printed form will really help, because a lot of students just don't remember auditory instructions as well. So
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent in that students probably get overwhelmed when they look at all my announcements, but
yeah.
it's best to have, too much information than not enough. And I think that the beauty, a lot of students, they get scared when they come to the research course, and that after about halfway through, they're like, this isn't as bad as I thought. What we really promote, like it goes back to your beginning objectives about student creativity.
Sure.
The students get to pick their topic, what they're passionate about, and what they want to write about, because a lot of times they can take this project, they could bring it to their master's or even their doctorate, and they can continue to build on it. Yeah. Say, like, they have a passion with helping to reduce heart failure readmission rates, right? Maybe they have an innovative strategy or something that they can help with, So being able to, that's what's so joyous to me about research. I'm not only a research guru, but that's what's so wonderful about research is that you can pick what you want to study. And it's wonderful. And the students get so excited, because they're like, I've learned so much. And I just had a student just recently tell me, now I'm part of the peer review committee, for peer review committee for to looking at best practices for the hospital. I mean, that what a great accomplishment. Or another student will say, I just presented a poster at our local research colloquium. So it's wonderful to see the students actually grow, not only being creative, but also owning a piece that they can actually identify to. It empowers them. It's beautiful to watch.
Well, that really, what you just said encapsulates why we're in this profession as it is, right? That's what we want. We want them to feel fortified. We want them to feel confident. We have skills in order to help them. And that's all we have to do. We just have to, I think, I teach for Harvard and in poetry, and a lot of people they feel poetry, especially, some of the poets that we study, like Allen Ginsberg and Walt Whitman, that poetry seems very inaccessible because it's a language that they haven't been taught, or sometimes they think that everything has to rhyme, and it's just very, very complicated for a lot of students. And what I try to do from the beginning of my course, I'm starting actually next week for the summer session, I just say, you know what, let's not get overwhelmed by this, because what I want you to do is think of poetry as a narration, as a story that's just in a different form. And let's just jump in there. Let me help you navigate through this poem, this particular poem, by understanding what the author has chosen. And this could apply to science texts as well, or math, or anything. But let's sort of make it less obtrusive and a little less inaccessible by saying, hey, you know what, you're in my research course, this is the first time you've taken it, or this is the first time you've taken my course, this is what I expect, but I'm going to help you through it. And just that encouragement will help so many students and really sort of break down the barriers of fear and sort of anxiety. I think that's what I always do. The very first Zoom session that I have with my students, or when I'm in person, I just say, look, we don't have all the answers, but what I'm going to do is help you get there throughout this whole course. And I think just articulating that helps a lot.
I think you're absolutely right, Kristen. And as Dr. Kevin, I don't know, Kevin, I call you. I go in between Dr. Thrasher, Kevin, this, that, whatever. It's always a respect thing. But the thing that we are working on in our faculty senate is what we can do to promote professional development for faculty. And I think that one of the most important things that a faculty member can do, regardless of how the student is doing, poorly, greatly, in between, what have you, you always have to encourage them. I am here for you. I believe in you. I know you can do this. And do you know how many students have actually turned around and said, no one has ever told me that?
Yeah, it's true.
So thank you. And you know, and if you really think about that, that's very sad.
Mm-hmm.
I have been very lucky between my husband, my dad, God rest his soul, and wonderful faculty and leaders at Aspen. I mean, they're just amazing. They just want you to be the best you can be,
Mm-hmm.
help you to be the best you can be, give you the tools to be the best you can be. And I just think that we just really need to motivate and inspire our students. And I know that can be a little bit difficult sometimes, particularly in the online, in the online community. But just like I said, just a simple email. I'm here for you. Let me know what I can do for you. You know, that's so important. I mean, it's communication. This is just the bottom line, and then they feel more comfortable to reach out to you, particularly the students, who may have ESL students, they may not know the language well, or they're still working on, doing better with their language and writing skills. They may be too embarrassed, to talk to us, or, so we just have to help them and believe in them and tell them.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. That's what I found has worked best for me since 2011. And I'm going to continue to do it.
That's great. Well, existence is difficult, and I think that we have to understand that. And it's this, this real sense of imbuing our students with that idea that we get it. It's hard. You're coming from a difficult spot, because that's how it is to be in life these days, especially these days, and especially during and after the pandemic. I mean, there are so many aspects to our students and to ourselves that we don't understand yet. I have students on both shores and all over the country and all over the world. I'm sure you do too. And who knows what they're going through. And I guess my approach always is to be kind and to be generous and approachable, and always help them with constructive feedback. But I always lead with some kind of positivity. Even if you think their paper is, something that you'd like to throw away, you can always find something positive. You can always say, hey, you know what, the structure isn't really that, it's not in place yet, but you found 6 pieces of evidence that really connect. That's great. Let's work with that. So though that makes somebody not give up on your class, on you. And generally, I mean, for some students, I'm sure you've witnessed this too, some students have given up on school because of negative comments from people of power. So Evelyn, were you going to say something?
All I'm going to say, and I'll end with this, where were you when I was going through high school struggling?
Oh, I
40,
wish I
50 years
had
ago.
you. Darn it.
You know, the
Well, I'm
more-
still here. If you know, if you need me, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the moral of that story, that last little conversation that y'all talked about, and the importance of inspiring students and giving them, you know, some encouragement so that they can take that step and go just a little bit crawl, you know, further ahead than they were yesterday. And the moral of that story is nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And we say this a
Right.
lot at Aspen with regards to our faculty and our students, that you have to show them you care. And once you do that, all the rest of it begins. And it starts being easier when they know that you care than when it's just someone who's, you know, pounding down grades on them and you don't really care. You know, I'd rather for you to pound me on my grades and care than to give me an easy grade and not care. You know, it's sort of my personal attitude. But anyway, I just want to quickly sort of summarize a couple of our ideas that we talked about here. And Kristen gave us two techniques, the mini papers and then the peel paragraph. And by the way, Kristen, we have a standardized preloaded curriculum at Aspen. So the faculty don't really create the coursework. And so it's hard for them to deviate from what is in the classroom and say, oh, everybody, let's do this assignment this way this week. And here's some points, right? But one way that I think we can do this is by modeling in like the discussion forum, right? So we could easily go into the discussion forum and say, hey, y'all, whenever y'all respond to your discussion question this week, can we please practice the paragraph, the peel paragraph strategy?
Yeah, I
And
was going to suggest that.
and I'll do it this way first this week to model for y'all. And then as people are going through that week and responding, part of your response is not only to their content, but also their use of the peel. Hey, great use of the peel. I really like how you outlined the purpose and you provided ample evidence and analysis and you linked it perfectly. Great job there, George. You know, and then so you're doing that through the modeling and they're doing it in a purposeful, functional reason to do it because they're answering a DQ. But you're helping them practice that in little mini papers almost, so to speak. You know, you can almost blend these together somehow. Where it's a smaller chunk and the trick here is just practicing the technique in smaller chunks. And then you say, okay, all this week we practice the peel technique. Can y'all please, and when you do your assignment this week, now practice that in your paper. And you can tell after doing this a couple of weeks in a live discussion where everybody's in there doing it and they're all practicing and they're getting feedback on it, how that could quickly change their behavior so that their writing dramatically improves in just a couple of submissions. You could see this I would think, you know, apparently in their papers, the dramatic leaps that they'll take, but you got to model it and you got to practice it. It's not just an announcement that we post and say, okay, everybody go do it now. You know, it has to be a lot of that interaction. And when they see you doing that, then that takes care of the first thing we talked about, which is you're showing them that you care. You're spending time to say, let me show you this. It's going to change the way that the rest of your education will be. It's not only benefiting you in this class, but you will then reap the benefits going forward in all your future classes. You know, Dr. Marcuccelli, I know you mentioned there that you get people and you're at the very end of the program and they still are struggling with some of the basics of APA. When I hear stories like that, to me, the fault is not the student. If the student is made to the 5th class and no one's ever told them they're doing APA wrong, then that's the faculty member's fault who are prior to you. So in your school and with your dean, y'all need to bring this up and say, look, it's everybody's responsibility to hold students accountable to writing. It's not fair to the rest of us to get to the end of the program and have students who still don't know how to cite and paraphrase and do a title page. Who is passing them all the way up to this point, you know, needs to be that conversation. It can't always be the student's fault, in other words, that they're writing for. We have touched them and interacted with them many times along the way where we could have given them one little idea like the peel technique and say, try this, it'll help. And then they'll say, well, dang, that did help. And now I don't see school as being so burdensome and I enjoy writing now. I look forward to my assignments. That little thing can change someone's perspective. You know, as y'all were sitting there talking about giving people hope, I literally have a Chinese fortune cookie sitting right here that I opened a long time ago that has its little message on the inside. And the message says, the most important emotion for a human is hope. And I've kept that because I think it's a very powerful message that if you give people hope, it doesn't make a difference what misery or problem they're facing, they will have the energy to try. And that's all we often are asking students to do, is to try some of the feedback that we've given them in their future papers. Okay, that was sort of my little summary there of things. I do believe another layer that overdevelops all of this stuff that we're talking about here is SES. So the student's economic status, and Kristen mentioned that about a third of our students, all students nationwide, live under the poverty level. Well, if they live under the poverty level, maybe their parents probably live under the poverty level too, right? And so I grew up in a home that was impoverished, maybe where there was not an ample supply of books. There was not people reading this elaborate sentence structure that shows, vocabulary and the beauty of language. They would often say, you tell me what your zip code is and I can tell you your reading level. And they're not saying that people of lower, income are less intelligent. They just have less experiences with interacting in ways that are more like school. And so you get the high SES students who come to school and they've already been doing stuff like school in their house. And you get the low SES students who come to school and it's the first time they've ever held a book and the first time they've ever written their name, and no one's teaching them numbers and colors or any of that stuff, right? So it's not, in my opinion, anything to do with demographics as much as income.
Mhm.
And when we have people who make more income, they're probably more educated too, and therefore, so they pass that on. Your example, Kristen, where you said you're sitting with your son saying, "Oh, add punctuation, capitalize that, put some quote," you're helping him properly do that. And in other settings and other homes who are struggling economically, and the parents don't have that time, and they're out working several jobs, and it's a one-parent home, and they're being raised by the older sibling, they don't have that person sitting next to them teaching them the right way to form. And so they get to us and we're like, well, what's your problem? Why didn't you learn this in high school?
Yeah.
Much more complicated than that. And it starts very early. The race to literacy starts it starts from the day you're born, and even earlier. Some research shows where people read to the babies in the womb and they end up having higher vocabulary and literacy and verbal ability later. But anyway, SES, I do believe, is always a layer of education that we forget to consider.
Definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, y'all enjoy the rest of your week. We're looking forward to seeing you again in 2 more weeks.
Yes, please come.
Bring a buddy. Linda and Evelyn, we are always happy that y'all show up. It really brings me happiness to know that y'all see value in this, that you're able to come back, and that you, while you come here, you also, I notice y'all say, I'm going now this week and try one of these. And that's all you got to do. Just go try it. If you try it and it fails and you don't like it, okay, you don't have to use it anymore, right? But if you tried it and it works and it helps one student, that one student who, Evelyn, you said was you one day, and when you were in high school, right? That someone didn't teach you a peel technique, or they didn't do one of these things that you would have said, man, if I just, and by the way, I still use a technique like that. It's not called the peel, but it was like, I went to Catholic school, and in 3rd grade, they taught us the way to format a structure of a sentence. And you have to always go back to summarizing what you started with, and tying things in. I still use that to this day. Not that it was some super genius strategy, but because it was simple. And it's simple to remember and it's easy to use. And as long as you use it, you will have superior writing. It just is a structure, and we don't do that. Remember, we're going to revert to the way we talk. And we just type until we hit the word limit, right? And we go back forth and maybe try to cover some stuff in the assignment, and we only do what's minimal, right? We got to understand that's the world they live in too. They're not here to be poets. They really aren't, except maybe in the poetry class.
No, they have to write analyses
but
on the
some are
poetry.
here because it is a course they're forced to take. And when they leave here, okay, I go out in the real world, my writing's not that important. I don't have to cite APA every day on the things that I'm doing. You know what I mean? And so, but can I coherently put ideas together? That's the important thing that we're trying to do here. And sometimes we struggle with their ideas being coherent.
Well,
about-
another thing is that
Uh,
we could focus on a world view, you know, a professional view is everyone has to write a work email. Everyone has to interact with their bosses or be a boss. And there, you know, good writing hopefully, you know, articulates a thought process and
work
the depth of
environment
thought.
very dry. In work environments, it's mostly directions or what
Sure.
are coming through emails or tasks, things to do, you know, so it's
Yeah.
not real, you just bullet stuff, you know. And so we also write a lot in that format to when then we have to change formats and become more, you know, coherent, then we struggle. Again, it's switching formats and knowing which
Yeah.
to use in which context. I think it's called
Yeah.
pragmatics, right? The way you talk with your priest and your formality and the way you talk with your supervisor and the way you talk with your child and the way you talk with your best friend, you would look like different people.
Mhm.
You would look like a different person in all those 5 contexts, but you're the same person. You have just realized the context that you're in and you've adjusted your behavior to fit the rules of that context. Students don't turn that off. They just use the same thing in all the contexts, you know, and we are like, okay, I got to be professional now. Okay, I can just be the crazy old person that no one would ever believe I would be now because I'm with my best friend, right? And we're at the beach, right? And etc. We change our behavior, but we also need to understand we change our writing
Mhm.
the same way based on the context and
Yeah.
so forth. But they don't learn that in homes where, you know, your main objective is trying to get food on the table today. You know, that's not a worry for you. So you have time and energy to spend on doing these additional enhancements to your child's education that sometimes other people don't have that opportunity.
No, I'm very aware of that. I mean, I've been there. I have been there. So
Reality. Yeah, we've all been in situations where we are struggling. I think many of us are in better situations now than we were when we were in that situation. But anyway, we're over time. Nice chatting with everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
thank you for coming.
Kristen,
Thank you.
okie dokie. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Linda. Bye, Evelyn.
Bye.
Bye.